Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Like now? Right now?
Like I'm recording right now.
Like right now?
Yeah.
Copyright.
Now.
Now?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
Now. Like now? Okay.
I swear to God, if you don't start, I'm going to stop again.
Welcome back, Inebri-art listeners. Welcome back to this week's podcast. And we're just here to mention a quick little blurb. This month's our sponsor is Kristen Winkelbauer of B-Box. And the B-Box is a quarterly subscription service where you can get, it's all sorts of prints, artwork, keychains, these cool like wooden laser cut pieces of art that Kristen herself does all the art behind this. And there's several steps to each one. There's a $15, a $25, a $35, and a $45 price point for each box. And obviously the more expensive the box, the more cool stuff you get inside. And it's just got a whole bunch of prints, stickers, all sorts of cool stuff that you can appreciate her art. She does really beautiful work, and so she's our sponsor. She sent us a couple of B-boxes to give away at our events this month. So if you attend the craft beer coloring or life drawing, we're going to have a chance to give away a B-box. And we also have a little gift bag that we have to give away also at those events. And we have the Queen Bee box, which is the $45 price point on that, the deluxe box. And that will be added into our prize package for our Facebook followers. So if you already follow us on Facebook, you're entered. If not, make sure you follow Inebri-art on Facebook, and then you'll be entered into all our drawings. And make sure you check out Kristen's artwork at, just search for Google the B-Box, and check it out. And if you don't want to subscribe on a quarterly basis to this, you can even just buy it one time, give it to a gift. I think it'd make a great gift. So check it out, the B-Box. Thank you, Kristen, for being our sponsor. And let's get into the podcast.
You pissed him off, you knew it immediately.
Yeah.
I really loved working with him, though. And he headlined for actually a number of people. And if I remember correctly, including Avenged Sevenfold.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Oh, they were assholes. And I'm like, that sucks, because I really like their music. That's a shame.
But see, that's the thing is, like, you can separate, like, this has been a conversation at work a lot, because of the Bill Cosby thing. And my boss is like, well, at what point do you think an artist would not, like, people would turn on the artist? And I'm like, it doesn't really happen. And she's like, really? I'm like, not really. I'm like, a lot of artists are fucked up. I'm like, for some reason in the art field, people can, not like that it's good or bad, but they can separate the person from the work. Like, Bill Cosby wouldn't hang out with the guy, but he's a great stand-up comedian.
I certainly wouldn't take a drink from him.
Yeah, exactly. But he's a great stand-up comedian. It's like if you can separate the guy from the work, then it's different. Did that record? Of course he's recording. He does that all the time. I'm halfway through the conversation, I'm like, he's fucking recording. And
I was actually watching it, I'm like, what the hell?
He does it all the time. Yep.
First time anyone's noticed.
You just interrupted. I was about to welcome our listeners, and you had to be an asshole. So, welcome back, Inebri-ites. This is Andy of the Inebri-art podcast, of Podcast Network. We are in the works of putting together our third and hopefully fourth podcast, because we're crazy. And we are here back at the Craft Beer Cellar on Main Street in Plymouth, where we record 90% of the time. Because they tolerate our bullshit. And we are here with Rich Keenan.
Yep.
And you are an author. I met you at Super Mega Fest back in the springtime.
Yep, back in April.
Yep. And you gave me a sample of your, it's a fantasy novel,
Yep.
And I read it. To be honest with you, it was there's a lot of crap going on that weekend. I was on damage control, so I'm not gonna lie. I remember bits of it, but not a lot. So
That's fair.
Can you give our listeners a kind of the sales pitch? What's it about?
So the elevator pitch I tend to go with that I've tried a couple, and different people have responded to different ones. The one that seems to have been the most effective so far is the story follows a young boy named Dannan. Dannan has grown up in a logging and hunting village on the edge of a forest, and he's a pretty normal kid. Nothing unusual happens in his life. All of a sudden, he's spending some time in the woods, and he sees a dragoness. And he is just so completely captivated that he just says to himself, as he sees this dragoness leaving, I have to find her again. This is just such an amazing experience. I need to pursue it.
Okay.
And the book follows Dannan as he's at the beginning of the book. He's an 11-year-old boy, so it follows him through his adolescent years as he starts to grow and follows his path to finding the dragoness again.
So is this? Do you have multiple novels, like trilogy type thing?
It is a trilogy.
Yeah.
The first book, Huntress of the Sky, is complete, and it should be ready any day now.
Yeah, we were talking about that. It's basically being printed, from what I understand. Nice.
The small publisher I'm working with told me we're waiting on one thing, and then it's ready to go. It'll be on Amazon. Going to try and get it right on the Kindle.
So it'll be digital download. Will it be in book form too, as well?
Yep.
Nice.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Having grown up with the things, I happen to love the feel of paper in my hands.
Yeah.
And I know there's plenty of other people who have already told me, look, even if you do it as an ebook, I'll buy it, but please do a physical copy. I want to be able to hold it.
Nice.
And I made sure to get a particular cover done. You can actually see it on the group page for the book, which is called The Chronicles of Dannan on Facebook.
On Facebook, okay.
And that's actually part of the cover, and I did a full back-to-front cover, so you can really
nice.
get the feel of it.
Did you do the artwork yourself, or
I did not.
do you want to give the artist a plug?
Yep. His name is Ryan Durney. He also has a Facebook page. One of the reasons I had chosen him as the particular artist, there was a sort of surreal feeling to the particular art style he had done at the time, very Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, cool.
And when I was talking to him, I said straight out, this is what I'd like.
Yeah.
It has this feeling of being real, but not quite too real.
Yeah.
It's that feeling of, there are parts of this, it's everyday life. And then there's, holy shit, that is not normal.
So is this kind of a swords and sorcery type of thing? Every time I use that phrase, people kind of get like, well, no, it isn't. And then they explain it, and you're like, yeah, it's totally swords. I get it's kind of a generic phrase, but...
I'll give you the sort of easy answer.
Okay.
That after doing some research on my own to figure out exactly which little 75th of a genre I fit in, because now everything is its own genre.
Right,
basically.
yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It's like people get almost offended that you say sword and sorcery. It's like, well, it's just a broad term. Like, I'm not saying they're all the same, but...
It's a mixture of low and high fantasy.
Okay.
Swords and sorcery all the way.
Yeah.
The difference is that it's separated between the low and the high fantasy. Because there are times in the world he's living in... Sorry, I talk with my hands all the time,
that's
so
fine.
if it gets distracting.
No. As long as you don't tap on the table.
Not a tapper.
Okay.
It's not normal for people in his time to see magical creatures. They're not common. They've basically said, you know what? Humans are a pain in the ass. Let's go that way.
So little kind of, and again, it's like, I hate, part of me hates doing it because I don't want to be like, oh, your book is like this. But to kind of give people some frame of reference. So a little Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the kids stumble into something it's not normal.
That is exactly it. And so part of his adventure, part of his whole journey is finding out, okay, there is actually a lot of magic in the world and actually a lot of magical creatures around them, but if you're not looking for them and you don't know what to look for, you're just going to walk by them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so he starts to find himself straddling this line of, okay, I'm not really part of the normal group anymore.
Right.
Other people don't pay attention to this stuff. My quest is kind of crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because the average person is thinking about, okay, I've got to go get a job, I've got to feed my family, I want to have kids.
And he's off hunting dragons.
He's going to find a dragon.
So is he kind of ostracized in some way for kind of being an oddball?
He isn't ostracized by other people because they don't know about it.
Okay.
Because he's
kind of keeping it on the down low.
Yep. He's like, if I tell people, someone's going to think I'm nuts and it's not going to end well. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut.
Nice. So where did your inspiration for this novel come from?
So there are actually a couple of spots.
Is this your first novel?
This is the first one that I'm going to be publishing.
Okay.
I've written a manuscript before this. I was like, no, this one's not going to go for sale. But this one, when I wrote it, I said to myself, I want this to be a book that I can actually publish.
Yeah.
Not something I'm just writing for myself, but something for other people to read.
Sure.
And I'm a massive D&D geek. I will admit it.
Nice. No shame here.
No, I was going to say, I know from the podcast you are as well, and you'll get a chuckle out of this. The moment I stepped down here, I said, oh, damn, this would be great.
This would be a great D&D room, right? Look at this table.
I was like, it's in the bottom of a craft beer cellar,
Yeah.
completely isolated. You could scream at 10 p.m., no one's going to hear you.
Yeah.
And there's beer upstairs, which generally leads to shenanigans.
Yes.
Which always makes D&D sessions better.
So,
as long as you're not the DM.
well, I am the DM.
I always DM.
But,
too, so.
sweet. Well, he's far away. But the one thing that I honestly and truly love about D&D, and because I have friends who are video game people, and they're like, oh, it's a role-playing game. I'm like, it's not a role-playing game. And the difference is the DM will grant a magical item to a player or the group or whatever, and at some point they will be in a desperate situation and will interpret that magical item or use it in a way that if you were writing a video game you would never even think of someone using it. Are you familiar with Critical Role?
I've heard you mention it.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to look into it.
It's only 100 some odd episodes at like 4 hours an episode, so it's an undertaking. But so at one point they're fighting a dragon, and they have an immovable rod. And for our listeners who don't know what that is, it's a magical item. You press a button, and it's a rod that just stays where it is, wherever you leave it. They teleported inside the dragon and put the immovable rod in place, so the dragon couldn't fly away. Therefore, taking away, the dragon couldn't turn to use its breath weapon, and it was just like one of those amazing moments where someone's crazy-ass idea, and the DM's like, shit!
I had a lot of fun being the rogue of my first group, and I will be the first one to admit I was nowhere near as good to those guys as I should have been, as a person or as a team member, but I was pretty straightforward as a rogue.
As long as you play your character, then you don't necessarily have to be nice to your...
Oh, yeah. No, I just meant as a general thing.
Okay.
I acknowledge straightforwardly I'm not the nicest person. People are always like, oh, you're so courteous, you're so nice. I'm like, you just don't know me well enough.
Right.
I'm always courteous, but I'm not nice. But the thing to me was, if you're going to be the rogue and be looting everything, because the party depends on you, you either screw up the trap and kill them all, or...
Rogues loot everything? I'm not aware of that, Kristen McKinney.
So my thing was, when I'm holding the party loot, they've got to be able to trust me. And I've got to know that when I get shot in the side with an arrow trap, I can run back to the paladin, and he's not going to lecture me for 5 minutes while I bleed out before healing me. So I was like, got to be trustworthy for them.
I used to have a T-shirt, and it was essentially the movie poster of Clerks, but a cartoon version. And the tagline from Clerks was, even though we serve you doesn't mean we like you. And the shirt was a cartoon D&D party, and it said clerics. Even though we heal you doesn't mean we like you. And I'm fascinated by the game. I've got my son involved. My son's DMing now. Awesome. My daughter plays. I love it for their age. You learn a type of problem solving that you can't teach any other way.
The closest thing I've ever heard in video games was a story I heard from a beta test situation, and I thought this was the funniest damn story. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Fable series.
The comic series?
No, the video game.
No.
You are Fish? Okay. So there's a video game series called Fable, and a lot of it's kind of open world.
Yeah.
I'd put it as a 50-50 open world.
Okay.
You have designated maps, but you can go anywhere you want in whatever order for the most part.
Yep.
And in this particular game, you can propose to people, you can buy a house, you can change your entire body type, you can get fat, you can get skinny, you can get a mohawk, you can do whatever the hell you want. They tried really hard. And so they're beta testing it at one point, and one of the beta testers is doing something that causes the creator to just go, that's weird. So you can actually become the mayor of the main town.
Okay.
So what happened was the player became the mayor, married the daughter of the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
So if the mayor ever died, he'd become next in line.
Then he kills
the
mayor.
It gets better.
Okay.
So he then kills the mayor's daughter, who is his wife.
Yeah.
So now he is the sole owner of the town.
Okay.
He then goes and sells the deed to the town for 3,000 gold pieces and walks out of town.
Huh.
And
that's pretty D&D-ish.
the creator goes, I didn't realize you could do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what D&D's all about.
Oh, absolutely.
Creating worlds and going, I didn't realize you could do that.
Or you say something kind of as sort of an offhanded comment as a DM, where you're just kind of describing the lay of the land,
mm-hmm.
and just something in your inflection, in your voice, they latch onto it, and suddenly they're off trying to break into some place where you're like, I don't even really know the layout of that place. I don't know who lives there. I don't really know anything about it. And you're off the top of your head being like, oh, it's a really tough lock. I don't know if you're going to get through. You don't have lock pick. Oh, shit, they rolled a natural 20.
Yep.
All right, so you're in a room, and the room has, and it's I tell it to my non-D&D friends. I'm like, it's more fun than you would ever think of having. You can't explain it, and no one really has a clear idea of like how it's played. They're like, oh, did you dress up? And you're like, no, why would I dress up? That's stupid. Do you go in the woods? No, you don't go in the woods. That's LARPing. We make fun of those people.
Yep.
And it's just this. It's very hard to explain. People don't understand it, and we are not talking about your book anymore.
We'll get back to it.
Welcome to the podcast.
One last funny story that always just made me laugh my ass off, because it can't happen in any other medium than in a game like D&D. So the DM was setting up a particular encounter, which was supposed to actually be our introduction to the final boss of the campaign.
Okay.
So this big blackguard, it's a mind flayer, he's about to kick the crap out of us. So our fighter's like, okay, I'm going to stab him with my short sword. The DM's like, fine, go ahead. Oh, you can see on his face he's already planning for the villain to kick the crap out of him.
How am I going to make this go badly for him?
Natural 20.
Yes.
DM's like, fine, you hit him because you needed that to hit.
Right.
Roll again. Natural 20. The DM's like, fine, you criticaled him. Roll your damage. You're like, no, I got one more roll. I hit a natural 20. DM's like, fine, roll your damn 20. All you're going to do is double damage anyway. Triple 20. Instant kills the final boss.
Oh, jeez.
The DM just has this look on his face, and he goes, what just happened?
Yeah, and then it's like, shit.
And he's trying to figure out how to stop it from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those, it's controlled chaos in this weird. So I always relate it to people of like, okay, think of J.K. Rowling writing Harry Potter and having no control over what Harry does, and Harry can be like, nah, I don't want to go to wizarding school. And you'd be like, but you have to. Nah, I don't want to. But there's Ron and Hermione. Nah, I don't like them. And you're like, what do you mean you don't like them? Nah, I don't like them.
They're not nice to me. Hagrid will visit.
Yeah,
I'm going to go exploring.
Yeah, this Draco Malfoy guy's okay. You're like, no, he's not.
It's funny you say that, because that's actually a big part of the inspiration for my book. I basically wrote the characters like I would D&D characters, and I said, I'm going to make them a person, and I'm going to put them in the world, but I'm not going to say, okay, you have to do this. I know what I'd like the endpoint to be, but I've created these people. I don't want to shoehorn them into a really terrible story that they'd be like, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
But you need to go into the dungeon. It's a frigging dungeon. There's no light. There's creepy sounds coming out. 25 people have been murdered in the last 5 days. I'm not going into the dungeon.
Yeah, and how many times do you hear people say, like, wait, why would he do that?
Exactly.
And be like, well, it moves the story forward. And be like, yeah, but it's clearly not the right thing. Like, no one would do that. No one would move towards the axe murderer.
Exactly. And one of the characters, it's funny because this part I can give away without it being a spoiler because it's part of his main adventures. He goes to a sword school because since he comes from a hunting and logging village, he doesn't know how to protect himself.
Right.
So he does the practical thing. He goes and learns how to use a weapon.
Sure, yeah.
Which, in a world kind of similar to 1400s Europe,
Yep.
it's not a perfect match. There's a lot of other cultures. It's not quite as religiously driven. It's more of a secular culture.
Okay.
And there are religious cultures there, but it's a lot like the D&D world, where you've got this group over here and this group over here, and they don't kill each other because that's a lot of resources that they don't have to stop the random crazy bad guy up north.
Mm-hmm.
Because, hey, there's usually one, and they're usually up north, let's be honest. If you think about it, they're always up north.
Yeah, it seems like it, yeah.
Except for in real life, where it's Canada, and no one worries about Canada.
Yeah, it's true. Well, maybe we should be.
Very
We
true.
don't know them.
And so, he has classmates, and when I first started doing the outline, I said to myself, okay, I can't just make it about his quest. There's got to be something that keeps him in the regular world.
Mm-hmm.
I'll write him a love interest.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work. The character was like, you're an idiot.
Right.
Because they were two very different backgrounds. And I'm like, okay, I can forcefully change this character, or I can let it flow.
Yeah.
And she wound up with someone else, and the whole subplot I had expected to create didn't matter.
So you kind of sort of stream of conscious, right? When you do that, like kind of each decision, you kind of be like, okay, how would he go through this decision?
I was going to say, rather than stream of conscience, I try to make it like I'm basically watching a TV show.
Yeah.
I know who this person is. I know how he'd react.
Yeah.
I know who this person is. I know how he'd react. If I want them to start a fist fight, I've got to give them a reason.
Mm-hmm.
If they're both heavy beer drinkers, well, maybe the only thing I can get in is a bar brawl.
Right.
But based on their backgrounds, maybe they're going to actually beat the crap out of some third person and become friends.
So, did you ever get to a point where, because like you obviously had a end point,
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of found yourself drifting away from that end point and had to then, not necessarily shoehorn, but add another influence, or...
Well, one of the things that I found was, and as a fellow DM, you're going to go, oh, yeah, I do this all the time. I basically gave a sort of broad river for them to flow down.
Yeah.
They can go off to the left or off to the right and find many dungeons here and there, but you know they're going to reach the waterfall at the end of the river sometime.
Right, yeah.
So I tried to make it so that that came as naturally as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was no feeling of, like you said, why would I do that?
Right.
He's obviously smart enough not to go chasing the axe murderer barehanded. He'd go back and get his sword and maybe a couple of friends, and then they'd go kick the crap out of the guy.
Right.
Who they know exactly where he's going.
Right.
He wouldn't chase him down by himself.
Yeah, and that's kind of, players can always, back to DMing,
Yep.
but players can always opt to not take the job.
Yeah.
But there's kind of that established, unspoken agreement of, at least in the beginning, you have to accept the job, or we're all going to be sitting here doing nothing,
Yep.
And to me, that beginning is always the part that is kind of a little ham-fisted.
Yeah.
And then, but like once you kind of get into the flow, and then it becomes like you said, it's I have a general idea of the world and what's going to happen in the story. I don't know how you guys are going to get there.
Yep.
But I have a goal in mind. I hope it's the goal you got. I don't know what your alignment you're going to decide to go with.
Yeah.
I hope you choose the side of good, but who the hell knows, And like I see people be like, "Oh, we're gonna run an evil campaign." I'm like, "Isn't that really up to the characters to decide whether it's an evil or good campaign?" And
I would always ask the players in my group, okay, which type of you tell me what you'd like to see from the campaign, and I'll tailor it from there.
yeah,
One of the things that I learned from I read a lot of different books when I was younger.
Yep.
And this story always makes me chuckle still, which was really unusual because I couldn't read until the summer before 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
As in, I couldn't read or
Yeah.
pretty much anything in English. I could speak, and that was it.
Yeah.
Because the public schools just kept passing me along because they're like, okay, you're a pain in the ass, go to the next
Just go.
grade.
Yeah.
And when I told my mother, who's a librarian, she's like, oh, this is bullshit, no.
Yeah.
So, hooked on phonics, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes, you will remember those old commercials.
I remember the commercials, yeah.
Oh god, hooked on phonics worked for you.
Worked for me. Yes,
Wow.
I was like, might be the only person I ever meet that it actually worked for. But
like, I've never even heard anyone who like owned it, bought it, or whatever. That's awesome.
And after that, my father introduced me to fantasy.
Yeah.
And the first book he gave me was the kind of thing you'd hit your kid with if you didn't like him, The Eye of the World from the Wheel of Time.
That big book. Research says yes.
Back? Yeah.
Actually, research is holding up his fingers to a microphone like he's an idiot.
I'm not telling them, I'm explaining it to you.
Yeah.
It was, I think, 400 to 500 pages. It was about a third of War and Peace.
Yeah.
And so I got hooked
And you were
on
how old at this point?
I was 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And so I jumped from being completely unable to do Red Rover runs wherever to, okay, we've got 5 different subplots, we've got multiple storylines going at the same time, jumping between different character perspectives, and I started with those and just never looked back.
So what's your favorite fantasy series?
That's a tough one because, for me, I really enjoyed a lot of aspects about the Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if you've ever heard of the Redwall series by Brian Jacques.
Have we heard of that?
Yes, I have.
Yes, we've heard of that.
Fish is like, damn it, Andy.
I have to move over now.
Feel free to join the conversation. It's always more fun with more
Yeah.
people.
All right, Fish is joining the conversation. I'm going to take a nap now.
No. I can say yes, I've read these.
And basically, it's a bunch of anthropomorphized animals who live in an abbey, essentially 1300 England, and each different species of animal, from mice to otters to badgers to weasels, all have their own racial characteristics in many ways, like a D&D campaign.
Yeah.
You've got your evil races, you've got your good and your neutrals. I really enjoyed that one, and that helped me look at things and say, okay, you don't necessarily need to hit every problem the same way.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you want to approach the end boss from the back and clunk him over the head rather than listening to him gloat, that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Someone might not die because you took the quick and convenient but not quite nice route.
Have you ever heard of there's a YouTube series called How It Should Have Ended?
Yes, and I love it.
The one that got me hooked was the one about Lord of the Rings and how it should have ended. And they basically just get on the Eagles and fly over Mount Doom and hurl the ring in. And they're like, can you imagine what it'd be like if we walked? And they're like, one of us might have died.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That and the Star Wars one. There was one they did after the prequels, and they had been talking about essentially what would the Vader and Luke interaction have been like after we learned the whole backstory of Vader, when they're in the Cloud City and Luke's hanging.
Oh, I think I see. And it ends up with like Luke smoking a cigarette, being like, "Now you're not even trying," and just like walks away.
The one I had seen, so it might not have been How It Should Have Ended. Vader's talking about, oh, I won all these pod races, I blew up this entire Star Destroyer. What have you done? And he's like, wait a second, you can't be my son, you suck. Never mind, I'm leaving. And I'm like, that's harsh, but I love it.
Yeah. Now the one that I saw was, Vader's like, I'm your father. He's like, no. He's like, and Leia's your sister. He's like, what? Really? And Obi-Wan does this. He's like, well, that's really unlikely. And then like cut scenes and like Luke smoking a cigarette and Vader's like leaning on the rail, being like, yeah, and the Force is just like these small organisms called metachlorians. And he's like, yeah, I'm out. I'm all set. And he just like walks off set.
But yeah, so I took a lot of my inspiration from things like that and basically said, I don't want it to be cut and dry. I want there to be aspects of real life that people can understand, so it's not... I mean, yes, it's wonderful when you think of some of the amazing cities like Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings. But no one can connect with that unless you actually lived in Rome or something.
I grew up in Minas Tirith, thank you very much.
And so I tried to add a lot of the aspects.
Really? That's funny?
I just have this mental image of, like, fantasy Whitman in my head.
It's not much different. It's just got centaurs. I mean, the real one has centaurs.
And so I tried to have aspects of that. Oh, yeah. What would have happened in a fantasy world if this happened right at the advent of the printing press?
Yeah.
That's very mundane. People can picture, they can see an image of a printing press and understand that.
Right.
They can understand what happens if you describe a building as being made out of plaster and wood. They can get a visual image of that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a 30-foot tall treehouse glowing with magic.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's very effective at just going, holy crap.
So it's more
this is
grounded
awesome.
in, like, physics.
I wouldn't
Not
say
necessarily.
just real-life physics,
Yeah.
but it has more mundane aspects
Yeah.
than you might necessarily expect from anything with the word high fantasy.
So I do work in marketing. I would choose another word than mundane.
Fair enough.
Well, how's your book? It's mundane.
I had considered that.
He's got words.
I can tell you it's long.
Yeah.
But I also try to do that to increase the juxtaposition of when you see something that makes you go, holy crap, this is definitely unnatural.
Right.
As I'm picturing this, I'm going, what would I do? Oh, I'd flip out.
Right,
Because
right.
that's the normal person's reaction.
Sure.
They don't go, oh, hey, a dragon. Let's go kill it and loot its hoard.
Yeah.
They go, oh, a 40-foot tall dragon. It's gonna eat us!
So, obviously you're into fantasy. Are you into other types of literature? Yeah.
I am a big science fiction and fantasy geek. My thing...
Science fiction and fantasy geek that I met at Super Mega Fest.
Yeah, big shocker there.
I am flabbergasted.
For me, I've always had a problem with horror, whether it's literature or movies, because I always just see these scenes and you can hear yourself screaming in your head, you just heard a thump on the other side of the door.
That's exactly
go
what we're
open
talking
it.
about. Is like,
And I was like,
the horror is the most impractical reasons for doing things.
and for me it's frustrating because when I look at fantasy or science fiction, horror should be part of it.
Right.
There are some absolutely horrifying aspects to culture shock in real life.
Yeah.
That people have experienced. Now imagine you walk up to something and it's got 6 arms and you have culture shock.
Yeah.
You're just gonna flip out.
Yeah, but it's one of those ones where people tend to do things that make no sense for no reason.
It's to advance the plot, because,
Yeah.
Right.
let's be honest, if you get the phrase, the call's coming from inside the house, you're out the door before they finish the sentence, because, no.
See, would that really even work now? They'd be like, the call's coming from inside the house, and you'd be like, well, it's a cell phone, and it's not, well, it doesn't really work that way anymore.
It's like, guys,
I can- yeah.
it's like, seriously?
For all of us who don't remember having
No one really
landlines.
has a
Yeah, exactly,
landline, so I don't really know, but it's like,
The text is coming from inside the house!
great. I'm getting DM'd on Twitter. Awesome.
And so for me, I have to say that science fiction and fantasy allow you to suspend disbelief, but can also include parts of enough of the real world to help you associate with it. Some historical fiction, always been good. Some historical nonfiction as well. I've always really enjoyed studying the aspects of what led us here.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff, you say, okay, yeah, the Founding Fathers had a revolution, this all makes sense. And then
That was the
other
last podcast. No, that wasn't the last podcast. It was... Never mind. Nothing. Bad history. Bad Andy. Shut up. Okay, go on. You were saying.
And...
Pilgrims, Founding Fathers, kind of, sort of. Never mind.
And other times you're like, no, based on what we know, there's no reason anyone should ever do this.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to travel like 1,000 miles to attack these people, much less get anything out of attacking them.
Yeah.
And then you discover, oh yeah, actually it really had to do with the fact that this person had a bee in their bonnet and was like, you know what, screw you.
Yeah.
I'm coming for you. I know this is a waste of money, but I hate you just that bad.
So, so fantasy, you're obviously into Dungeons & Dragons and gaming. Are there, like, movies that have influenced you in writing this book, or...
No movies specifically. When I was writing it, when I first started writing it, and I have to give a shout out to my fiance Lisa, who was my muse in this. She basically said, okay, you enjoy Dungeons & Dragons, you enjoy writing.
Does she get it? That's a no. That pause was too long.
For a normal person, she came to a Dungeons & Dragons session and was willing to sit in and watch my group.
Okay.
So I have to give her so much credit for that.
All right.
When she's like, okay, this makes no sense to me. And she's dyslexic, so the reading drives her nuts.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is I had a girlfriend that did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the same experience. Like, I enjoy watching people play D&D if they're entertaining people, but it's also because I really understand D&D.
Yep.
If D&D is, like... Again, I'm such a fan. But it's like one of the greatest games because you can play and not know any rules.
Yep.
You don't have to know any rules. People just like, okay, you want to roll that one. You want to roll that
Yep.
one? What do you do? And that's all you have to do is answer that question is what would you do? And if you're not playing, it's just not the same experience.
It really isn't.
You know?
And she had pushed me to write it, and at the time I was writing it, I had already read the Aragon book series, and
Yep.
I enjoyed it. It was well
That's
written.
the Dragon Star Wars one, right?
Yeah, kind of.
They made a movie of one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They made a movie of one. And as the movie was coming out, I was like, okay, do not be Aragon.
I was watching the movie and just be like, oh, that guy's Obi-Wan. Okay, that one's Han Solo. To me, it was just very Star Warsy.
Yeah,
I never read the book, so I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't see the movie because I heard it was too different from the books.
Yeah.
And the books didn't really feel too Star Warsy. I could certainly draw
Yeah.
some comparisons.
Yeah.
But it wasn't sort of beat you over the head. God damn it! This is the Millennium Dragon!
Yeah, it you know.
It flew the mountain in 1.2
Like,
minutes.
There's a magic spell that shows you an image of the princess and she's asking for help. I'm like, yeah, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
So shout out to Lisa, was it?
Yep.
Hey, Lisa. That's our shout out. So you didn't really have a lot of influence from movies, but is there like if you're going to sit down and Netflix, like, is there like what would you recommend?
Definitely fantasy. If I had to recommend anything from Netflix, ironically enough, I've always been a sucker for the sort of basic fantasy that a lot of children's movies,
Okay.
Beauty and the Beast,
Yep.
that style, bring. And not all of them are good. Plenty of them suck.
Yep.
I did see How to Tame Your Dragon.
You know, that looks really good. I haven't seen it. I've heard really good things about it. I haven't
The
seen
first one was better,
Yeah.
and it was reasonably what you'd expect. I mean, the main character is an angsty teenager, and he acts like an angsty teenager.
it. Yeah.
I was recently having a discussion on Facebook, and someone's like, my God, I hate the destined child plot thread of you know exactly what you're supposed to do, you know everything about your life, and you just go do it. I don't like that either. And this kid, he's not that. He's just kind of your average kid. He's like, I want to do what I want to do. My dad's the chief. He wants me to inherit the chieftain position of the village, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I want to screw around with gadgets, and I want to have fun.
You're not
and
my real
explore.
dad. Yeah, that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And he develops as a character. Not everything turns out perfectly, but you actually see real character development. Definitely in a world that no one's going to look and go, oh yeah, I remember when I woke up and rolled over to my dragon and it accidentally burned one of the drapes up. No.
Yeah.
It's very much that feeling of just getting out and saying, yeah, there are normal people here, but it's not my world.
Right.
And so I enjoyed that aspect. The second one was not as good. It wasn't terrible. I'd give it like a 6.
Yeah.
So, not rewatch material. Maybe watch once if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've always just enjoyed. I mean, obviously, you referenced the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
I saw the old animated one.
Oh, I grew up with that.
Yeah, so did I. That's why.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's part of why you see so many of these influences, because once I started getting into these, this was my bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
You might never have heard of the online game EverQuest. The first one?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Because there have been like 5 different
I used to
iterations.
play. I never played EverQuest. My big thing was Ultima Online.
I do remember it.
And to the point where you're like, did I just spend 6 hours chopping fantasy wood?
Like,
Wasting my life.
and you're like, oh crap, I need to get to work in an hour.
It's 7 a.m.
Yeah.
I haven't gone to bed yet.
Yeah, one of those like, I'm just going to do one more. Oh, is that the sun coming up? Shit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I
It's school in 2 hours.
I grew up playing EverQuest with my father, and some of the most random stuff. We had a modest guild. There were only about 30 people, but the
Yeah.
guild master was a really nice retired guy, and we got really attached to him. One of the pairs of guild members got married in game.
Yeah.
They knew each other. Like, obviously, people are... It's weird for a lot of people, I think, to understand there was a time before you could text everyone at any hour of the day.
Yeah.
I remember those
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
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 I won't be making you feel too old on this podcast.
No, this is great. This is awesome. We have a friend of ours who would be like, oh, hey, we're all going out for drinks or whatever, and yeah, I'll meet you there. And like 2 hours in, you're like, where the hell are you? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I got caught up making armor. And you're like, fucking shut the game off, will you?
Yes. I know
or
you
be
won't-
like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm getting married. And you're like, what? And in game, and you're like, oh, Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I remember, because I was actually one of the people invited to the wedding, so me and my dad went, and we're sitting here for like an hour watching this in-game wedding. And I read an article online a couple of months later, and they're like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. Who gets married in a video game? And I was like, you just don't get it.
Yeah. I stopped. Ultima Online was like the last video game I played. I mean, there's been like little points here and there. I played, a little bit of Luigi's Haunted Mansion. And, someone loaned me Splinter Cell, and I'm like, this is stupid. I don't want to sneak around.
I always put on the cheat codes and then went and shot every
I just want
guard.
to kill shit. Yeah. But that was like the last video game I played on the regular because I got so involved into them, and it's just like I like to do stuff. And
Yeah, I tended to... At a certain point,
Yeah.
actually at PlayStation 1, I actually switched more towards PC games than console games.
Yep.
Because after some of the games like Final Fantasy VII, I'm like, okay, a lot of these games suck.
Yeah.
I know what they're going
Oh,
for.
I lied. I played Civilization 3 a lot. Speaking of PC games, I love that game.
And I was like, there's not enough... I know that they've got a limited amount of space because this was back before every single game had 64 gigabytes of information.
Yep.
Back when we could only have 5 megabytes of information. And it was on a disc.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, some of you people might remember
even
those.
before that, like the
Oh,
little cartridge that you had trying to get it to work.
I started on the Sega Master System and the NES. So yes, I remember
yeah.
going, damn it, just shake it, it'll work.
Yeah, or like you push down the cartridge and it's like that flashing screen,
And it's like, oh, I did something
and
wrong.
you're just trying to like align it a little bit to the left or to the right.
Yeah.
And like
Gotta remember the old...
then it's like the start screen, but it's frozen.
Yeah, God, we had a ColecoVision, which just makes no sense now because it's a knob in numbers, and I honestly, God, if you plugged one in right now, I would have no idea what the hell to do with
But
it.
here's the funny thing: I wanted ColecoVision in the worst way. Why? Because it had D&D on it.
I never realized that.
ColecoVision had a D&D game, and a friend of mine had Coleco. This is like Andy's elementary school.
So 1980...
85-ish, say.
Okay.
And I wanted ColecoVision in the worst way to play D&D.
Yeah, so from PC games, that was right about when R.A. Salvatore really started writing, so the Icewind Dale trilogy came out, and of course, then the Icewind Dale trilogy came out for PC, so I'm reading the books, then I played the games, I'm like, oh crap, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
And so that's when I really switched over to PC games.
Nice. Are you a fan of Game of Thrones at all? Is that like...
I tried reading it.
Because that just seems to be like one of those things where, for lack of a better term, the norms seem to like it. You know?
It's a very non-traditional fantasy. Well, it is.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I don't know. Like,
it's a traditional fantasy, but it's mean to traditional fantasy fans because every time you think you know, it's like, oh, the main hero. Oh, they cut his head off. All right, the main hero's son. It's like, okay, he's dead. And
You're
it's
supposed
like
to say spoiler alert, but everyone dies.
Yes,
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years, and I'm less likely to get beat up over it than you are.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things too. I never watched the show either.
Yeah.
I know there are going to be people who will want to lynch me for not reading the books or watching the show. But when they ran all the articles about the Red Wedding and everyone literally dies, I'm like, okay.
Pretty much.
To me, everything I hear makes me think West Wing with fantasy.
No.
I've never seen West Wing.
You've never seen the West?
No. We go over this all the time. You always tell me I should watch West Wing, and out of spite,
I haven't watched a lot of it, so don't crucify me.
Someday
you
will get over me recommending Kings to you.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Kings?
I haven't actually heard of it.
So pissed.
Kings was... It was a weird decision to make. It was an allegorical retelling of the story of King David, set in modern times.
Okay.
So think of it as if the U.S. had a royal family.
See, that's the problem.
Oh,
That's how they sold it, and it really wasn't like... It was a weird... They advertised very badly.
So,
it was a
long
very
story
cool
short,
show.
I watched the first season, which he loaned me, and I'm like, this is fantastic. When's season 2 coming out? He's like, oh, it got canceled. I'm like, you son of a bitch!
Oh,
But the season we got, it had Ian McShane, it had the kid from Aragon doing probably, like, legitimately really good work.
Yeah, it was good.
It was a really good show, and it's just, it's over.
It just leaves you in a lurch.
Oh,
But
that
I
hurts.
don't understand, like, this mass... I understand the mass appeal of Game of Thrones. I don't understand why it was Game of Thrones that really... It's not...
It was HBO. It was a big budget. It was tits. I mean, it's...
I was going to say, you've
But
got
that's-
nudity, gore, and politics.
But there's
people love
But
those.
there's plenty of other fantasy movies like that.
Yeah, but none of them were made... I mean, I'll be honest, the production values on Game of Thrones is really
Oh, it's
I was gonna
it's
say.
yeah. I'm not.
and
I'm
most
not
epic fantasy tends to fall flat.
Yeah, and I was really kind of asking the guest. not
I
you.
know, but I'm sitting here, and it's what
Hey,
I do.
but I have to listen to you talk all the time.
No, normally...
He drove from Worcester.
That's fair. We're only driving to
we're,
Worcester.
We're going to Worcester this
Yeah.
weekend.
Oh,
Are you going to MassiveCon?
I've basically been under a rock while I've been
okay.
getting the Facebook page
Yeah.
up, doing my day job, and getting all this
there's
stuff done.
a Comic-Con in your neck of the woods this weekend.
I didn't even know. It's a shame because I'm sure there are going to
Surprise!
be people I like who will be there, but I'm probably going to be a bit late for the ticket. So
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who the guests are. I know they have a couple of Pirates of the Caribbean guests, which I thought were interesting. And then I remember a lot of voice actors, that sort of thing. Well, that leads into an interesting question. If I'm assuming, like at some point, it would be like a dream come true kind of thing, as if your book got made into a movie. When you were writing, was there like someone's like an actor in mind? Did we kind of like, of someone's voice specifically that you kind of heard your character through?
it's funny you say that because I had never considered it as a movie when I first started writing it, ever in a million years.
Okay.
And because my fiance had asked me, okay, why do you want... Oh, and I should probably mention, too, I got engaged a month ago.
Oh, nice.
So
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that has also been keeping me busy.
You've been
so
yeah,
busy
you've been
that
busy.
I literally forgot propose. She would kick the crap out of me. She'd like, oh, you forgot. I probably shouldn't have said that on the microphone.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll edit that out. Wink, wink.
No.
Yeah, no.
I know you're never doing that.
No,
That's okay.
we don't do that.
I've always told her, you can ask me whatever you want, and I will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I can't promise you won't hit me for it.
Right. You won't necessarily like it.
It might have been stupid, but... So I knew to keep all the tertiary rights,
Yeah.
comic, graphic novels, movies, action figures, what have you, but I'd never considered it as a movie.
Yeah.
And she'd asked me, what's my dream for the book? And I said, okay, I want it to do what many of the fantasy books did for me. if I inspire one person,
Yep.
one single solitary soul, to say, okay, I can write a book. Whether it's because they love it or they go, oh, you're a piece of crap, I can write better. Go for it.
Right,
I'll
yeah.
be glad to read your work. If it sucks, I'll tell you. If it's great, I'll tell you. But I wanted to inspire someone else the same way.
Yep.
And so I go from stepping stones up from there. If I can make a nice vacation once a year out of it, I'd be thrilled. That would be wonderful. It would be beyond my wildest dreams if I could sell enough to make a day job out of it.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of authors actually make that much money
sure.
off their work.
Yeah.
People are always throwing out Stephen King. There are 10 to 100,000 authors who live off of their work
It's like,
in all of the fields, not just one.
Sure, Stephen King does it, but he's the exception, not the rule.
That's the thing. And so for me, I was like, I would love it if I could get to the point where, because I'm a quick writer, because as a DM, as you know, you have to improvise very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So when a scene starts going, I just run with it. If someone's running down the hill and there's a horse chasing them, they dive behind a bush.
Yeah.
Because the horse can't dive behind a bush after them. And then you just go with how do they avoid getting stabbed from behind from there? And you just keep running with the scene to see where it goes. And so writing the books often goes quickly. Editing is a slow and painful process.
That's the one thing that I hear a lot from people is that's the...
I'm very good with grammar. It's one of the things that, after all the reading I did, English class came very easily to me, so I loved it. And I always say to people when they ask me, okay, well, how do I edit my book? Well, first of all, you have to be willing to say, yes, you're my baby and I love you,
But I'm going to
but
cut
you're
your
doing
arm
it
off.
wrong. Yes. But you're running like an idiot.
Yeah.
Put your arms like this and go straight.
Yeah.
Not wee all over the place, left, right, zigzag. And so you have to be able to take that kind of hacksaw and sometimes say, okay, this scene is worthless to the book.
Right.
It's got to go. Maybe I don't need much of a transition because it was actually an unnecessary scene. Maybe I've got to figure something else out. And so for me, I enjoy the writing aspect. The editing aspect is actually, I think, at least as long, if not a little longer than the writing aspect.
Yep.
But I could probably do 1 or 2 books a year if all I did was write.
Right.
8 hours a day, which would in some ways be a dream come true. But...
And then I've actually had guests down here before who have been like, I don't necessarily want to do it all the time because it would kind of take away what's special, what I enjoy.
Yep.
It would then become a job and
Yep.
laborious. And so I think everyone's got to kind of do their own thing and figure out
Absolutely.
what works for them.
And one of the things for me, too, was I had studied marketing in high school and also in college, and so when I realized I was writing this to sell it, I'm like, okay, this has become a job. I love it still. It's a job I can enjoy, but I have to treat it like a real job. I can't just slap things in.
I feel like you already have a huge advantage because even taking a marketing class, I don't care what it is you decide to do, that's so beneficial. I know so many unbelievably talented artists, musicians that will never go to where they want to go simply because it's one thing to be unsure about yourself, but it's just you can't, you have to almost shut off at some point and self-promote regardless of those self-doubt and
absolutely.
And you just kind of have to learning to market what your skill and what it is really difficult, and not everybody does it.
I'll put it this way. I'm an extreme introvert who suffered from chronic depression all his life. Mm-hmm. So combine that with a crippling social anxiety, it's amazing that I'm sitting here talking to you.
Yeah.
If I can write a book, manage to get it published, and you can go through CreateSpace, you can have Amazon do it,
sure.
You can peddle it out to a traditional large publisher. You can go about it however you want. But stop saying, I'm going to try, and say, you know what, damn it, I'm just going to sit down and do it.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much you might not like yourself, you might be afraid of what can happen, all you can do is try.
Yep.
And if you don't try, it doesn't matter whether you'd fall on your face or not, because you'll never really know. But if you try, who knows? I mean, I was fortunate. I was introduced to you, to Brian Hall.
Mm-hmm. You were saying horrible things about Brian just like before we turned on the mic. It was awful.
I know. I'm so glad you weren't recording. He's a wonderful guy.
He's a good guy.
I love how he does the legendary Kingdoms of Aterra.
Mm-hmm.
And having read the first book, it really does read like a fighting manual.
Yeah.
There are basically 2 fights for the whole book. You're fascinated for the whole 2 fights. And if you were to watch those on a movie screen, you'd say, okay, they read the book because it's a step-by-step guide of how to kick someone's ass.
Right, yeah. Which you would expect from a Kung Fu instructor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I met a variety of people. I met a great guy named Jack Hammer from the Electric Radio Show.
Yep, I met him at MegaFest too.
I was going to say, after meeting the 2 of you, I'm like, you'd both like each other. You got similar senses of humor.
Yeah, I was actually picking his brain about the podcast. So, again, Brian introduced me, and I messaged him just the other day to see if he was going to be at Massive Con, which he's not. He's got something else going on. But...
And so I got very fortunate. And to me, this is one of the things about being courteous. Be grateful to the people who are helping you.
Mm-hmm.
You and Fish are taking time out of your day.
Fish isn't doing shit.
And, hey, if they give me a minute, that's more than they had to.
Yeah.
And be grateful for the people who help you. You see all the people on the Oscars, on the Tonys. Thank you to every single last person who helped me and let me go down the list. Do you really think they're that grateful? If the only time you hear from them is when they give that damn speech when they get the award, you're not really grateful.
Yeah.
Say thank you sometimes.
But, well, to be grateful, to be appreciative, and it's just like...
And it's hard.
It is, because, I mean, sometimes you just want to be pissed off.
Oh, yeah.
But the one thing that I've found since we started this about a year ago, maybe even like a year and a half ago when I changed jobs, is the power of just saying yes.
Yep.
You know, someone's like, hey, can we do this? And you're like, yeah, let's do that. And
Fish hates that word.
Fish hates it when I say it because it usually means more work for him. But it's just like listening is meeting new people, listening to their ideas, you know, coming up with ideas. And, you know, I say plenty of dumb ideas that, you know, don't go anywhere. I thought you were going to list them.
I was waiting for a list.
You know, and
Dude, this place closes in 45 minutes. We don't have time to list everything.
But it's just like, you know, it's the mentality of it's not really failing. It should just go, yeah, all right, that didn't work, let's do something else. And it's just moving on from there. And I think that's really powerful. And I'm glad that you kind of put your struggles aside and got your book out. And where can people go to find that book?
So right now, as I said, it should be available any day now.
Well, by the time this goes up, it'll probably be available.
Yes, it should be.
Yeah.
The main place for information about where it's going to be up is Chronicles of Dannan, the Facebook group.
Yep.
So it'd be facebook.com/Chronicles of Dannan. If you search for my personal author page, it'll be R.F. Keenan. Mm-hmm. I didn't do Richard Keenan because there are a whole crap ton of them on Facebook, including one in Ohio who, just as of last year, was convicted on child molestation charges. So I don't want my name to come up.
You don't want to be mistaken for that guy.
So after
been like, so I was researching you online and found some interesting things. Not that guy.
And disclaimer, he's a lot older than me, and he's a mayor in a city in Ohio.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with me. Yeah. My page will have the information. I'm hoping to have it up completely ready for sale on Amazon at that point.
Nice.
There'll be physical copies to order. I'm going to get it on everything I can.
Nice. And I believe you said you're going to give us a physical copy to throw into our prize package. So every 100 likes we put together a prize package and pick one of our followers to give it to. Probably the breakdown of this, we're pretty close to giving out one, so yours will probably go into the 1,000 likes prize package.
Works for me. Big milestone.
Yeah, so that'd be pretty cool. And so our followers can find us on Facebook, Twitter, at Inebri-art. If you want to complain about Fish's attitude, you can send that email to Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And I totally understand. Rich, thanks for coming down. I mean, you drove a while to get here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And next book, we'll get you back.
Sounds like a great plan. I've already finished the outlines for Book 2 and 3. I've posted the tentative names on Chronicles of Dannan as well.
Nice.
Book 2 will be Dragonbound, and Book 3 will be Death of a Dragon. whether it's the dragon
I was
from
gonna
the
say,
first
I feel
book.
like that's spoilery.
You don't know. You won't know until
Right.
you actually read all 3 books,
Nice.
whether it's the same dragon or not.
Excellent. Well, again, thanks for coming down, and thanks for listening to our podcast listeners, and we'll see you next time.
I look forward to being here for the second book.
Excellent.